So we'll go ahead and get started. I am going to introduce Fran Wyllie here. She's the development manager and accessibility specialist at Northern Commerce. In addition to her responsibilities managing her dev team, she owns accessibility for all of Northern across all of their different technologies. And she combines a background of both web development and interactive media design, but goes beyond just, meeting up with WCAG standards and requirements to make sure that everybody can benefit from, accessible solutions, and they all have an equitable experience, and just really meeting those high standards. So it's really great. And she's a certified web accessibility specialist with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So a real long name to just show,
It's a mouthful.
exactly. That it just shows that expertise there. So everybody, if you can join me in welcoming Fran, that'd be great. Glad to have
you here. Awesome. Yeah, I am so glad you all decided to come spend your time with me right after lunch. So thank you all for being here too. It's nice to be here. Super excited to be chatting with you all today about something I and a team of my fellow coworkers have been working on for the past year or so, of completely overhauling our accessibility practices at Northern. For those not familiar, Northern is a digital agency that we have got teams, all across the board. We've got dev, marketing, design, you name it, we do it. And over the past couple of years, we have been doing acquisitions, bringing a lot of new team members on board who have a lot of their own practices and a lot of their own tools and things that they're using. So I was tasked with the duty of putting it all together, finding the best of what each team is doing and standardizing it to one platform that everyone can use. And by one platform, I mean one standard set of tools, not one specific tool or platform. And yeah, we're all unified, doing the right thing, getting everybody trained and up to standard. So yeah, let's talk about that, shall we? As Rich so graciously mentioned in the intro, my name is Fran. Hello, so nice to meet you all. For those who haven't had a chance to meet yet, I hope we get a chance to meet out on the patio later with a beer. Please come say hey. Where do we start? I'm sure this will sound very familiar for most, if not all of you in the room. Anyone who has worked in the accessibility space knows the struggle across every single team is, it's too complicated, I don't know where to start, what tools am I supposed to be using? Because there's so many out there. Every team has their own unique struggles. And this was a lot of what we heard from our team too. It's just extra work, it's too much money, we don't have the time, you name it, it's been said as a roadblock. And for a reason of, why we don't really need to do accessibility. And that goes Fran, as a reminder, hey guys, we need to freaking do accessibility. So that was really one of my main motivators here, is just getting everyone on board. This is not a one-time thing. I think I've given this presentation a couple of times now, and it's been revised over the last couple of years of how do I keep reminding my team that accessibility is important, and what I'm doing now to get everyone on board. It's really an iterative thing. Keep reminding people, keep people refreshed, that way it doesn't slip. So yeah, I hope, does any of these resonate with you guys? Yes. Just curious, what departments do you guys work in? Shout it out. Are we dev? Content? Are we project managers? Design, yep. Awesome. Glad we have a good range of folks here. So where do we start? We recognize there was problems, something that we need to fix. Let's chat about the foundation. So it really started with me just going around, chatting with everyone. So doing a quick survey of what tools are we using, what are our pain points, what do we like, what do we not like. Same way that we would do with clients when we're doing discoveries for the new projects that we're building. We're doing that internally, but just really focused on our accessibility practice. So again, that covered automated tools, manual testing processes that the team is using, getting an understanding of what the team currently knows, where they're getting stuck, and seeing, I was looking for areas that I thought the team could use more training. I know a lot of the team, we already been over a lot of the empathy training of why accessibility was important. And that was one of the things I actually found surprising when I was chatting with our teams was they'd been through the empathy training a couple times, like, why is accessibility important? And they're like, Fran, I don't need another one of those presentations. Like, we've done that enough. But they were really struggling with, like, actually, reading the WCAG, understanding what the issues meant and how to actually resolve them. And getting to the more technical side of it was definitely an area that I needed to focus on and bring some more knowledge to the team. And then finally, like, reviewing some of the projects that we had launched over the past year, 2 years, 4 years, you name it, and seeing, what the pitfalls were, what areas for projects that we had launched were failing, where were we lacking, or whatever happened, like, not even worried about the context of the project, like what happened if, maybe we ran out of money, ran out of time, you name it, seeing where we lacked. And knowing that that was also somewhere we could prioritize our focus for training and, where we should go. So, then finding our champions. So from those surveys, I like to use the term accessibility curious. I feel like it's more casual than like, you're gonna lead accessibility. And they're like, oh no, Fran, I can't do that. Finding people on the team who were at least curious to learn more, or someone who was a bit more like influential in their department or on their team to not take on something serious, but just come along for the ride. Help me out with a task here or there. I obviously prefaced it with, I know this is an extra thing on your plate. I know you're very busy, but volunteer-based, making sure that they had time to put it in their schedules, and empowering those people who did potentially want to get on board to get on board and come with me on this journey. And that was pretty successful. I got a few people from each department. One of the other things that I really wanted to focus on was for our dev teams. We have mainly the two focus areas are the public sector, so our Drupal sites that are higher ed, government mainly, and we also have our whole like e-commerce dev department. So we were running pretty different accessibility practices on each side of the company, pretty siloed, not a good space to be in. Getting a member representative from each department was super important to understand like what workflows was working for each one of the teams. And getting a volunteer from each one of those departments was huge. Gave them time. That's the biggest thing, because we're all so busy, especially in the agency space. I'm not sure if any of you guys are also in the agency space, but it's crazy, 24/7. And then this is what I felt like. I felt like this was really important. It's important to me. One of our old founders, anyone in the Drupal space might be familiar with Digital Echidna. That's who we were before Northern. Andrew Dunnigan, the founder of Digital Echidna, always used to say, we're not saving babies. And that was one of my favorite things that has stuck with me, but this was a moment that I was like, I could actually be saving babies. I was taking this so serious. So this was me assessing all of the options that were out there. So I spent a good 6 months just like in sales calls with different different companies, assessing their products, seeing what would work for our team. Obviously, one of the biggest areas I spent time looking at was all of the automated audit tools. So something that we can like run against our full sites and see, get a collection of all the issues, and also like a history of all the issues that we found. Something that, again, with the silos that we were currently working in, the e-commerce team, like something that they really needed that we didn't have in our current platform was user flows, going through the checkout process. And that was something that myself, the dev team I lead, is on the public sector side. And so like workflows are not really something that we do in like every single one of our sites. We have a complex form here or there, We'll usually just run it on like the in-browser testing, but having something, as important as the checkout process on the e-commerce site, like this was huge for the e-com team. And I was like, I definitely need to get an automated tool that could do that, because our current tool wasn't doing that. And I hadn't chatted with them, so I didn't know that I was letting them down in that sense. So meeting with so many people to see what tools were out there, what would meet our needs, so on and so forth. Same with screen readers. I had learned during the survey process that our dev team, that were primarily on Macs before, were slowly converting all to Linux. So, where they had VoiceOver already installed, or they could install the NVDA, no longer accessible to them. They couldn't use any screen reader, just like built in on their computers. So I went out looking for a solution there. Found an online tool that was screen reader emulator that everyone could use, no matter the platform that they were on. Super great. You know, check. I say this so quickly, but this was like a 6-month at least process. Yeah, new user testing agencies. So part of our user experience testing, something that's really important is like, you know, getting the people in the room, getting the testing. And for accessibility, that's also super important. We never really had like a go-to agency that we went to. Really, you know, depending on what the actual site was, like we like to get people local because that just works, like local to where the company is from. But through this, I made a connection with the Helen Keller agency, who we have a regular, you know, ongoing conversations with now that we can always reach out to, and we've established that relationship going forward, which is super great. And the biggest one, new internal guides and documentation. So fun, right? Yeah, so our documentation, as I said, like with so many teams coming together, it was pretty fragmented. It was all across the board of, you know, nothing was just in one place. You know, you went to one doc and it would link you to another one and link you to another one, and it was just an absolute mess. And so reviewing all of that and figuring out what we can cut, what we can bring together, and also writing new documentation for all these new tools that I've come up with was a journey. So assessing, making the plan there was step one. So yeah, the system we built. Let's chat about it. So, excuse me. As I said, documentation, that is where I started. We actually started this as I was doing all the interviews and all the sales calls to find the new products that we would be using. We started the assessment of all of our existing documentation, and we started rewriting it, we started simplifying it, and really bringing it all into one place. In this, one of the other big changes that we did that I found that really helped was giving a section to each department. You know, making sure that everyone had their own place to look. You know, I got a lot of, during my survey phase, like, I won't say complaints, a lot of feedback from members outside the dev team saying that they thought all the documentation was just dev focused. And so they're like, oh, that's not for me. I don't even need to look at that, you know? But with our new documentation, we've got it split up in roles, and it's all referenced in the one same place, so that everyone is always looking at the same references, and, you know, having it tied to each role, everyone feels a bit accountable because, you know, I'm calling you out directly, so can't say this is not for you. Yeah, and then so in our documentation, just examples of some things that we added, some things that we updated. You know, a lot of it is examples and referencing to like WCAG. I know that was a pain point for a lot of devs previously, so we did take some time to like reword things, and you know, there was a lot of AI involved for this documentation, which was a great help to, how do I nicely say, dumb it down, you know? Give us examples of easy ways that we could say, hey, here's this common thing that we do on every single site that we always mess up, like accordions. Why are we always building accordions in 3 different ways? Let's make one unified approach. Let's put it in the documentation. Let's put it in our default install, and that way it's just out of the box. Everyone knows what they're doing, and with references to how we're getting it done. Yeah. For our QA team, making sure that they had scripts that they would follow through for doing their testing. The QA team, I found they all had varying levels of knowledge with accessibility, and they're all doing things a little bit differently, which led to the dev team frustration of working with one QA team member, they would get some responses, and the QA responses from a different team member would be totally different, and just cause confusion all across the team because nobody's doing the same thing. So that was ultimately my goal there. And along that same vein, the issue classification standard. So created a template that we're using Airtable for now to really just like organize everything easily, prioritize things for the devs, makes everyone's lives a lot easier. And for our content team, we've got our writing guidelines. Our director of user experience, he has this wonderful presentation that he has been working on and updating for, as long as I've known him, worked together for like 8 years now. It's all about writing for the web, and it's all about like writing for the users, and a lot of that does include accessibility. So making sure that everyone's up to date on that, everyone could speak to it, because it is so important for anyone who is creating content. If you want to hear more about that, we can chat. And yeah, WYSIWYG best practices, making sure the writing is everything semantic, so on and so forth. Image standards, all this included in the documentation, so that everyone has one source of truth. How do we get better tools in the process? This is arguably, I think, more important than documentation. I will say, as a dev background myself, the documentation is going to be the first thing that's forgotten. It's good to have it there when you need it, but if it can be forgotten, it will be. So, some of the workflow changes that we implemented was creating new task templates. So, for each of the tasks that the team gets, we make sure that we have in the template, so in the default setup, every time a project manager wants to create a task, accessibility is already built into that. At the most basic level, it's just a simple checkbox saying, I, the dev, who am passing this on, has acknowledged that I have reviewed accessibility. That is like the most simple part. We do have workflows in place for if there are more complicated pieces of like, you know, each step, like I did the keyboard testing, I tested it with NVDA, so on and so forth. But just something that, you know, you can't progress this task unless you have physically checked that you did check for accessibility. And really just like putting it in everyone's face that, hey, you need to be doing this. To hold people accountable to say, you know, you said you did this, you better have. Similar vein to that, having dedicated swim lanes in our task management system, so in Jira, you know, as we move things along in progress, if we're doing QA, part of the QA process has their own swim lane for accessibility. And then giving the team those reusable AI prompts. So for a lot of our like ongoing processes and things that we're doing on every single issue or every single ticket, we just created a set of like, you know, default prompts is what I've just been calling them for the team of like, here's the pre-context of, you know, look at this reference on the WCAG, be an accessibility professional, you know, all the usual default prompt stuff that you would give any sort of agent that you're working with to make sure that it gives you the appropriate response and is actually looking at the right places and not just some random documentation or random response on Reddit, which I find happens a little too often. So that involves things like providing, you know, code examples or like fixing common issues. Or even one of the ones that I have shared at the end there is what we use to create our report that the QA team shares internally. That's just pretty much a more formalized executive summary of like all the issues found, you know, where our focus areas, what we should be doing, how we're ranking, things like that. We've just got all just in prompts that the team just copies over and does, and it's just become a standard part of our process now. Excuse me. Then some more common things are dev integrations. So of course, linting in IDEs. So as the devs are actually writing code, making sure that it's actually prompting them. Something that we're looking into right now along that vein is rolling out to our devs like AI-based IDEs, like the devs in the room if you're familiar with like Cursor, Windsurf. Yes. Yes. Haven't officially rolled it out yet, but we have a couple of members of the team working on it and seeing how it works, and that's definitely on our radar for definitely help with accessibility as we're writing code. And then, as I mentioned in the previous slide, creating that component library with accessibility built in, so all of our base install elements are accessible out of the box. So if there are reasonable things that we do on every single site, it'll just be accessible. Devs don't even have to think about it. Accessibility scans in the pipeline, pretty standard stuff. Just making sure that that was implemented on every single site and making sure that our DevOps team has that set up for each site, and that's part of our new site intake process. QA team, so giving them the actual checklist, giving them the actual workflow that they should be running through for each individual task, and making sure that they also have access to that screen reader emulator tool that I was talking about to give them access to review with NVDA and JAWS. And then for our content team, that we created an alt text decision tree, so when to use alt text, when not to use it, what you should include, so on and so forth. And yeah, as mentioned, writing guides, And something that we tried to focus on, one of the big areas that we found the content team wanted more info on, was interest in the cognitive accessibility. So how do we write content for people with different disabilities? Like, one of the big ones that comes up these days is like people with ADHD, all the kids these days. How do we get them to actually read our content? And part of that comes down to this. So what that did for our culture at Northern, and what made it work. So one of the big things that I've really been trying to push is making sure that we are celebrating our wins. Because, we shouldn't just be celebrating when we launch a site. We should be celebrating the little things too, Motivate people with that positive reinforcement that what they're doing is great. And so we're sharing announcements whenever we do big wins like that, or even small wins. Like, hey, I solved this one little issue that's been bothering us for a long time. Why not shout it out? Good news is good news. The more the merrier is my mindset there. And really, a lot of the focus of this was really making sure that all of the information for accessibility was in the whole team space. So making sure that they didn't have to go to a third-party tool, making sure that things weren't buried in documentation to get to, and really just making things easily accessible for people to find. Right now, we've got weekly accessibility office hours running, so it's just 30 minutes that I have on Fridays for people to pop in, ask questions, share things that they're doing, answer questions, so on and so forth. Something else that has been really successful is cross-team peer review. So as I mentioned, with the commerce teams and the public service teams having very different workflows, it's been really great to have them reviewing each other's work. Because that way you're not like making assumptions of something that you're already familiar with, or like, oh yeah, I know this is going to happen, so I assume they did it right. Having someone from someone else's team really helps to get some fresh set of eyes on what the team's doing. And then, of course, our dedicated Slack channel to ask those questions if you can't come to the office hours. And finally, what surprised us, when we brought this to the marketing team, I was actually surprised that they were noticing accessibility issues more now. As I've taught them some things and we brought them some training, I've got a lot of messages on Slack that are like, hey Fran, I just noticed this. I'm not sure if it's an accessibility issue. What do you think? And I'm like, I love that you were thinking about that. That is amazing. And so that definitely surprised me that they were even remotely curious about that. And the dev team's participation and interest in new tools. So dev teams are historically I don't want that extra thing on my plate. But as soon as I was like, hey, help me out with those AI prompts for accessibility, they were fully on board. Oh yeah, Fran, you say AI, I'm in. I was like, thank you. So that was awesome. Whatever it takes to get people involved, I will do it. And then our ongoing challenges, just keeping things up to date, balancing the automation and human insight. I think I've seen that point on just about every presentation I have seen today. And then maintaining momentum. So, this has been out officially in the Northern world for 2 months, so it's still very fresh of what we've dropped. So keeping that momentum going, keeping people interested is something that I'm going to be working on over the next year or so. So maybe see you next year back at this event, talking about how I kept that momentum going, but we shall see how that goes. I'll keep you posted. And some quick notes on what we did differently, really just keeping it smaller. We took on a lot, and it was very stressful having to do so much work in such little time. And then also just involving people earlier. I think a lot of the teams, even though we did the surveys and we were talking to them, they were surprised or still holding on to their old ways of doing things. And so I think easing our way into it of one tool at a time maybe would have gone a little bit smoother for adoption across the team. And here's those resources. I promised you a quick snippet of what our outcome was. Yeah, I decided to put them all on one screen to save you guys from taking some pics. Yeah, so those are just some examples of some of the documentation we've been working on for you to check out and use as you will. And yeah, that is it. My next slide is just Q&A. I'll leave that one up for a sec while you guys take any pictures, but